She stood alone at the edge of the ballroom, a glass of untouched champagne trembling in her fingers, while her husband's voice drifted through the open terrace doors. The night was full of music and laughter, but Evangeline Sterling, Duchess of Thornwood, heard only his words, cold and precise as a blade. "My marriage is a matter of duty, nothing more. We both understood that from the beginning." The other man murmured something she could not catch, and then her husband, Alexander, replied with a sound that might have been a humorless laugh. "She is perfectly adequate. The estate needed a mistress. It is no great romance." Evangeline did not wait to hear more. She set the glass down on a passing tray, her hand so steady that it surprised her, and walked through the glittering crowd. No one stopped her. No one noticed the new Duchess retreating with a smile fixed so tightly that her cheeks ached. She had been married for 3 months, and in that moment she realized she had been waiting for a love that would never come. The coach ride back to Thornwood Hall was silent. Alexander did not accompany her. He remained at the ball, dancing and conversing as if his wife's early departure was of no consequence. When her lady's maid helped her undress, Evangeline stared at her reflection in the mirror, at the girl who had entered this marriage with secret, foolish hope. She had believed, perhaps naively, that duty could bloom into affection. She had watched her new husband's serious gray eyes, his rare, fleeting smiles, and she had let herself dream. Now she understood. She was a fixture, a well-bred ornament, nothing more. The next morning she sat at the long breakfast table, the silver coffee pot gleaming between them. Alexander arrived late, crisp and composed, already scanning a letter. He nodded to her politely. "Good morning, Evangeline." "Good morning, Your Grace." Her voice was soft, but she did not look up from her plate. He paused, perhaps sensing a shift, but only for a second. He returned to his correspondence, and the vast dining room swallowed them both in silence. From that day forward, something inside Evangeline began to quietly, irrevocably change. She stopped waiting. She stopped lingering at the window when she heard his horse in the drive. She stopped planning conversations over dinner, hopping to coax a genuine response from him. Instead, she filled her days with purpose. Thornwood Hall was an ancient, sprawling estate, beautiful but neglected in small, telling ways. The tenants' cottages on the eastern edge of the land had leaking roofs. The village school was underfunded. The greenhouse, a fragile glass jewel, had been left to overgrow. Evangeline threw herself into these tasks with a quiet determination that surprised everyone, including herself. Weeks passed. She visited the tenants, learning their names, sitting in their humble kitchens while they poured her tea. She organized repairs, petitioned the steward for funds, and slowly transformed the neglected corners of the estate. She smiled more with the villagers than she ever had at formal dinners. Her shoulders lost their tense, desperate set. She began to laugh again, a light, genuine sound that echoed strangely in the grand halls of Thornwood. Alexander noticed, but he did not understand. At first, he simply remarked upon her absence at luncheon. "The Duchess is riding to the village again?" he asked the butler, a note of mild surprise in his voice. He was accustomed to finding her in the small parlor, needlework in hand, her eyes lifting hopefully when he entered. Now the parlor was often empty. He would walk past it, feeling an unaccustomed chill. One evening, he returned from a long ride to find her in the library, not reading, but studying a stack of ledgers with the estate steward, Mr. Nathaniel Carrington. Nathaniel was a younger man, earnest and capable, with an open, friendly face. He was leaning over Evangeline's shoulder, pointing to a column of figures, and she was nodding, a small smile on her lips. The sight made Alexander stop in the doorway. Something hot and unfamiliar flickered in his chest. "Am I interrupting?" His voice came out sharper than he intended. Both looked up. Nathaniel immediately straightened and bowed. "Your Grace, the Duchess has been most helpful with the new drainage plans for the lower fields. She has a remarkable head for figures." Evangeline closed the ledger calmly. "Mr. Carrington has been kind enough to explain the estate's management. I wish to be of use." Alexander's gaze moved between them. "I see." He did not see. He saw only the easy way she smiled at another man, a smile she no longer offered him. "I trust I am not keeping you from pressing business." "Not at all," Evangeline said, rising gracefully. "We were just finishing. Good evening, Mr. Carrington." She walked past Alexander without touching him, and the scent of lavender drifted in her wake, a fragrance he suddenly realized he had not noticed in weeks. That night he dined alone. She sent word that she had a headache. It was the third time that week. The pattern continued. He would catch glimpses of her striding across the lawns, her hair loosened by the wind, a basket of herbs over her arm. He heard the servants praise her gentle manner, the tenants speak of her kindness with real affection. The hall felt warmer, more alive, yet around him she had become a closed door. She was perfectly polite, perfectly distant. She no longer asked about his day. She no longer lingered after dinner. She had stopped seeking his attention entirely, and the loss of it stung in ways he could not name. The first true twist of jealousy came at the summer garden party held at Thornwood, an event she had organized almost single-handedly. She moved through the guests like a swan, serene and welcoming, her laughter genuine. Alexander watched from the terrace as Nathaniel Carrington approached her with a cup of lemonade, and she accepted it with a grateful smile. Their heads bent together in conversation, and then she laughed, a sound so unguarded that it made Alexander's hand tighten around his glass. Lord Benedict, his younger brother, sauntered over. "Your Duchess is a revelation, Alexander, quite the transformation. She used to be so quiet. Now she glows. Carrington seems to think so too." Benedict's tone was light, but his eyes were mischievous. He had always delighted in provoking his stoic older brother. Alexander's jaw clenched. "Mr. Carrington is an employee." "Employees can admire beauty as well as any man," Benedict said with a shrug. "Besides, I hear half the tenants adore her. She spends more time with them than with you, I'd wager." The observation, though casually made, burrowed deep. That evening, after the guests had gone, Alexander found her in the moonlit garden, alone. She was sitting on a stone bench, gazing up at the stars, and for a moment she looked entirely at peace, a quiet, self-contained serenity that excluded him completely. He stepped forward. "You enjoyed yourself today." She turned her head, and her expression when it met his was calm and unreadable. "Yes, I hope the party was a success in your eyes." "It was." He hesitated. "I see Mr. Carrington has become a close companion." Evangeline's gaze did not waver. "He has been a friend when I needed one. He listens without judgment. It is a rare quality." The words were not an accusation, but they struck Alexander like one. He had never truly listened. He had never given her the chance to be more than a duty. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken things, until she rose. "Good night, Alexander." She walked away, and he did not call her back. He stood in the dark, the scent of roses thick around him, and for the first time he felt the cold, creeping edges of regret. A week later, the portrait was discovered. It happened during a rainy afternoon. Evangeline had been exploring the upper gallery, a long, dusty room filled with generations of sterling ancestors. She loved the quiet there, the sense of history. But in a shadowed alcove, half hidden by a velvet curtain, she found a painting she had never seen before. It was a young woman with golden hair and laughing eyes, a delicate beauty caught in a moment of joy. The frame was carved with roses, and at the bottom a small brass plaque read only, "My dearest, forever in my heart." The brushstrokes were intimate, the subject clearly cherished. Evangeline's heart clenched painfully. All the old insecurities rushed back. This was the woman Alexander had truly loved. The woman he had lost, perhaps the reason he could never open his heart again. She had been a fool to think she could ever compete with a ghost. She stepped back, her breathing shallow. For a long while she simply stared, letting the knowledge settle. Then she carefully replaced the curtain and left the gallery. She told no one. That night she was even quieter than usual. Alexander, acutely aware of her now, noticed the shadow in her eyes. He tried to ask if she was unwell, but she dismissed him with a gentle, "I am just tired." The words were a shield, and he could not pierce it. Days later, an unexpected storm trapped Evangeline in the village. She had been visiting a sick child when the sky opened, and the roads became impassable. Nathaniel Carrington, who had accompanied her on a state business, arranged for them to take shelter in the village inn. It was all perfectly proper, a quiet, warm room with other travelers, but by the time the storm cleared and they returned to Thornwood in the fading light, a rumor had already reached the hall. Benedict, ever the gossip, was visiting. He met Alexander in the great hall with a raised eyebrow. "Your Duchess and the handsome steward stranded together for hours. The village tongues are wagging. You might want to pay her a little more attention, brother." Alexander's face turned to stone. He was waiting in the entrance hall when she arrived, her cloak damp, her hair curling from the rain. Nathaniel was a respectful step behind her, carrying her basket. The Duke dismissed the steward with a curt nod, then turned to his wife. "Come with me." He led her to the library and closed the door. His gray eyes were stormy. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" Evangeline met his gaze without flinching. "I imagine they are saying that the steward and I were caught in a storm and behaved with perfect decency. Which is the truth?" "You were alone with him for hours." "We were in a public inn surrounded by villagers. I was never alone with him in any improper way. Not that it should concern you so deeply, when you have made it abundantly clear that our marriage is one of convenience and duty." Her voice was steady, but there was a slight tremor underneath. The words he had spoken at the ball months ago hung between them, unspoken but understood. Alexander recoiled as if struck. "You heard?" "Yes, I heard." She lifted her chin. "You need not worry, Your Grace. I have no illusions about your feelings, but I will not apologize for finding friendship or purpose where I can. I am done waiting for what you will never give." The silence was devastating. She turned and left, and this time he did not try to stop her. He stood alone in the library, her words echoing. "I am done waiting." The finality of it terrified him. That night he could not sleep. He walked the dark corridors, haunted by the memory of her early days at Thornwood, how she used to bring him tea in the evenings, how she would ask about his day with genuine interest, how her eyes would soften when he entered a room. He had taken it all for granted. He had dismissed her gentle overtures, too wrapped in his own cold, self-imposed isolation. He had let her believe she was nothing more than a duty. And now she believed it so thoroughly that she had walled herself off completely. The realization of his own guilt was a physical weight, but there was more. A small, locked box inside him containing a secret he had never shared, a promise. He went to his study and retrieved a worn letter from a hidden drawer. It was from Evangeline's father, written years ago, when her family faced ruin and the old Viscount was dying. "Remember your vow, Alexander. You swore to protect my Evangeline when you were both children, beneath the old oak at my estate. I release you if you cannot love her, but I beg you to keep her safe from the world that would crush her." Alexander had been a boy of 14, she a girl of 6. They had met once, a fleeting summer, and he, young and chivalrous, had promised her father he would always look after her. Years later, when the letter came, he had proposed out of honor, believing he was saving her from poverty and scandal. He had told himself it was enough, but he had never told her the truth, fearing that she would feel like an obligation, a burden. He had hidden the promise behind a mask of cold duty, and in doing so, he had broken her heart. Now, with the letter in his hand, he saw the full extent of his foolishness. He had been so afraid of vulnerability, so scarred by his mother's emotional coldness and a youthful infatuation that had ended in betrayal, that he had locked away the one person who could have brought him warmth, and he was losing her. The next day he sought her out. She was in the greenhouse repotting seedlings with her sleeves rolled up, dirt smudged on her cheek. She looked up when he entered, and her expression was politely neutral, a stranger's face. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. "Something I should have told you the day we wed." Evangeline set down her trowel. "I am listening." He told her everything. The childhood meeting, the promise to her father, the letter. His misguided belief that a marriage of duty could shield her without entangling his heart. He spoke haltingly, the words dragged from him like splinters. "I told myself I was protecting you. The truth is, I was protecting myself. I did not want to risk caring for anyone because caring meant potential loss. I convinced myself that a cold, respectful arrangement was enough. I was a coward." She listened without interruption, her face pale but composed. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "You let me believe I was nothing," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You let me stand in a ballroom and hear you call me a mere duty. You never once gave me the dignity of the truth." "I know," his voice broke, "and I will never forgive myself for the pain I caused you, but I am begging you, Evangeline, not to walk away, not before I have a chance to make it right." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. "I spent months trying to reach you. I gave you every piece of myself, and you never even noticed until I stopped. How do I trust that this is not simply wounded pride because I found a measure of happiness without you?" The question hung in the air, sharp and honest. Alexander had no easy answer. He stepped closer, and for the first time she saw his composure crack completely. "Because you are the first person who ever made me want to be brave. When I watch you with the tenants, when I hear your laugh from across the garden, I feel something I thought I had lost forever. I am jealous, yes, ashamed, yes, but more than that, I am terrified that I have destroyed the only real thing that ever happened to me. I love you, Evangeline. I have loved you for far longer than I admitted, and I was too blind to see it." The confession, raw and unpolished, stole her breath, but she did not fall into his arms. The wounds were too fresh, the trust too fragile. She simply nodded, her expression softening by a single cautious degree. "I hear you, but I need time. I need to learn to trust you again." "I will wait," he said, his voice earnest. "I will wait as long as it takes. I will spend every day proving it to you." That was the beginning of a slow, tentative healing. True to his word, Alexander changed. He did not overwhelm her with grand gestures, but with small, consistent actions. He joined her on her visits to the tenants, listening quietly while she spoke with them, his presence a silent support. He began to have breakfast with her every morning, and rather than burying himself in letters, he asked her about her plans. He commissioned the repairs to the village school himself, and when she thanked him, he simply said, "You showed me what mattered." The staff noticed the shift. The tension in the hall eased. Nathaniel Carrington, ever perceptive, remarked once to Evangeline, "His Grace is a changed man. You have worked a miracle, Your Grace." She only smiled faintly, still guarding her heart. Then came the day of the portrait's revelation. Alexander found her in the upper gallery, standing before the curtained alcove. She had been drawn there again, trying to make peace with the ghost. He stopped behind her, seeing where her gaze fell. "You found Amelia," he said quietly. She turned startled. "Amelia." He reached past her and drew back the curtain, letting the light fall on the laughing, golden-haired girl. "My sister. She died of fever when she was 16. I have never been able to remove her portrait. She was the only light in this house after our mother passed. I wrote that plaque when I was 18 and heartbroken." Evangeline's hand flew to her mouth. "Your sister, I thought, all this time I believed she was a lost love, someone you could never get over." Alexander's eyes were filled with a sad understanding. "I see now how it looked. I should have told you long ago. There is no lost love, Evangeline. There is only you. There has only ever been you once I opened my eyes." The last barrier crumbled. The relief was so immense that she felt dizzy. The ghost was a beloved sister, not a rival. The final, painful knot inside her loosened, and with it, the tears she had held back for so long began to fall. Alexander gathered her gently in his arms, and for the first time she let herself be held, her head tucked beneath his chin, the steady beat of his heart anchoring her. "I am so sorry," he murmured against her hair, "for every moment of loneliness, for every cold word. I will spend the rest of my life making you feel cherished if you will let me." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. The hope in her eyes was fragile but real. "I want to believe you." "Then watch me," he whispered. "Watch me every day." From that moment, their relationship truly began to mend. They started taking evening walks together, talking about everything from childhood memories to the estate's future. He asked her opinions and genuinely valued them. She slowly let her guard down, allowing the laughter to return when they were alone. The jealousy that had once burned in him transformed into a fierce protectiveness, but tempered by trust. Nathaniel remained a friend, but his role was clearly defined, and Alexander found himself grateful to the man for being a support to Evangeline when he himself had failed. A month later, Alexander arranged a private dinner in the greenhouse, surrounded by the blooms she had nurtured. Candlelight flickered among the leaves, and he took her hands. "I have a confession," he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually steady voice. "I was so afraid of being vulnerable that I nearly destroyed the best thing in my life. You walked into this cold house and warmed it with nothing but your kindness. I did not deserve it, but I am endlessly grateful. I want to ask you, with no duty or obligation attached, if you can love me. Not the Duke, but the man who has finally learned to love you with his whole heart." Evangeline's eyes glistened. The man who once said our marriage was a matter of duty. He flinched but held her gaze. The man who was a fool, the man who has learned that love is not a weakness but the greatest strength he has ever known, that man is asking you, Evangeline. She stepped closer, bridging the small distance between them. "Then my answer is yes. I loved you when I thought you could never love me back. Now I am learning to trust that love again, and it grows stronger every day." He cupped her face gently and kissed her forehead, a reverent, tender touch that promised safety and passion intertwined. "I will never give you reason to doubt again." The seasons turned. By autumn, Thornwood Hall was a different place. The tenants were prosperous, the estate thriving, and the Duchess walked with a new confidence that drew admiring glances wherever she went. Society whispered about the transformation of the cold Duke of Thornwood, how he was seen smiling, how he rarely left his wife's side at functions. The old scandalous rumors about the steward faded into nothing, replaced by stories of the Duke's devotion. One crisp evening, they stood together on the terrace, looking out over the golden woods. She leaned into his side, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "Do you remember the ball where everything changed?" she asked softly. His arm tightened. "I remember my cruel words. I will regret them until my dying day." She shook her head. "Do not. If I had not heard them, I might have spent years chasing a ghost of a man. Instead, I found myself. And in doing so, I found you again, the real you." He turned her to face him, his gray eyes intense. "You saved me, Evangeline. You saved this house, this estate, and my cold, foolish heart. I never believed in such things before, but I know now that some promises are written into the stars. I promised your father I would protect you. I did not know then that you would be the one protecting me from my own isolation." She smiled, a radiant, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. "Then we saved each other." He leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that was tender and full of unspoken vows, a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and hard-won joy. In the months that followed, their love deepened, steady and true. The gallery where Amelia's portrait hung became a place of shared remembrance, not sorrow. And when, the following spring, a new portrait was commissioned, it was of Evangeline, sitting in the greenhouse with a book in her lap and a secret smile, painted by the same artist, with a new plaque that read, "My heart, my home, my forever." The house that had once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, with gentle teasing, with the quiet, constant music of two hearts finally beating in unison. And when the villagers spoke of the Duke and his Duchess, they spoke of a love story that had bloomed from the coldest soil, a testament to patience, self-worth, and the courage to stop waiting and start living. A love that, once found, was never lost again.